Well, now it's 1 o'clock, so hello everybody. It's absolutely lovely to see you, and I hope you're doing well. I'm expecting the numbers to be considerably low today because the sun is out for what feels like the first time in weeks, and of course, lots of things are opening up. So, if we stick around quite low numbers, I'm very grateful to those of you who have come. And also, if you're watching on catch up later, that's really sweet of you. Thank you very much. And as I always say, thank you for all your support. It's also really interesting to get messages after talks about things that have been inspired. People have been interested in stuff. It makes me really happy to sit here as a sort of, I don't know, a spreader of random ideas and thoughts about music, and to feel that there's an answering call coming back, and that people are really getting something out of it, going off to listen to things, coming back with responses. So, in fact, one of the suggestions for today comes from Mike House, who got in touch to last night to suggest a CD, and on our list it's their Secret History. It's a fantastic recording. I've just had time to listen to it once. Otherwise, the recommendations today are last week's suggestions, because of course I completely ran out of time because I got excited about conductors and all that kind of thing. So stick around. If you can come into the listening library later on and sink yourself down into a Chesterfield, that would be very nice. Incidentally, the cover today features a Kentish icon of food, which is, of course, the gypsy tart. And I don't know how many of you recognise that pudding. It's a, I suppose, on the surface of it, disgusting concoction of condensed milk and brown sugar in a pastry case. And for school children, it was served in accordance with regulation. It had to have half of a green apple, presumably to clean your teeth. But gypsy tart was a really Kentish thing, and I got embroiled in an internet thread this week and then started thinking about gypsy tarts, and I will indeed be going to find one very soon when I venture into town, all masked and sanitised. There's a rude poem about gypsy tarts, which all school children knew in Kent, and they would really chant it in the dining hall. And I think I'll say it at the end of this Facebook session because it might offend the more delicate. Anyway, well, the sunshine's been great. The tooth hasn't been great. So those of you who were watching from Lockdown Singers, which I attend most mornings with the wonderful Matthew Nash, do check it out. It's really invigorating. We talk a lot about teeth, partly because of Elton John, who you'll see also inveigles his way onto my slides. And that's because of the way, of course, Elton John sometimes delivers some of his classic songs. Anyway, I suppose the vengeance was that one of my teeth had to be ripped out on Monday. And months and months of increasing pain and anguish have ended with a new little way for the air to come in. So that's nice, I suppose, but also a sign of aging. More to do with music, more creatively. I've given 2 online talks, or made 2 video talks since I saw you on Friday last week. One for Southern Early Music Forum, which was about the Salve Regina, and I so enjoyed discovering more about how intellectual Victoria's early Salve Regina for 6 voices is, full of canons, a sort of challenge, a riposte to Josquin from a couple of generations earlier. But I've also recorded a talk about Josquin's career and reputation and his effect really on the world of music in the 16th century for Run by Singers. This will be released sometime within the next couple of months. Look out for publicity, and I'll obviously give it a plug. But that felt really challenging to say something meaningful about such a great composer in the short time. But when I finished, I knew I'd done something. So that, as it goes, felt like a good one, and I'll give it a plug. And the other thing, which many of you may have experienced, is I had a sort of half or quarter rehearsal. So whereas a week before I went up on Monday and conducted 17 singers, for this Monday, we went with the regulations, which, as you know, changed late, and we had small group singing. And there is something very forlorn about this, really. And of course, it's only guidance, and we could be bold and iconoclastic and just go ahead anyway. The problem is, of course, then of insurance and liability. And we live in a world of such caution, I think, in relation to those kinds of things, of people being responsible for something that goes wrong. But we also live in a world where we want to care for our singers and make sure that they're well and that we're not exposing them to risk. But there's been so much Facebook chat about this. We don't need to stoke it up. But it's been distressing, actually, because for people like me and Matthew and other conductors who are watching, their work was put on hold. Although in Wales now, they are allowed to sing together in groups, which is great. The land of song. So the other things I've been doing is slipping inside country churches when I can for inspiration, wandering about the Kentish countryside and taking inspiration from the buildings and the sense of history in those worn stones. And I also had a little walk around the cathedral. Now, in Canterbury, if you live within the area, and also before when I was working for the university, you have a free entry to the cathedral. But most visitors have to pay what are, I think on the face of it, really rather high entry fees. For a family, it can be £30-40 for them all to come in, I think, if you aggregate the individual charges. And then I watched this talk on the cloisters, and Canterbury featured a lot. And I thought, gosh, I'm so lucky to have this access. Then I went on Google Maps and read the reviews of the cathedral, which, of course, are a huge number in big range. But I went to the least favourable reviews to see what... And the main thing people said was that they were angry about the charge, and they felt that they should be let into their cathedral because it's part of their common heritage. And I found that really interesting because it chimes enormously with arguments around the provision of music and the way that professional musicians give their product to the public. Because what people are saying there is, this belongs to me and I claim my access and my common ownership. Even though, of course, many people who are saying that don't go to church, don't believe in God, and their outrage seems to ignore some of the things that they treasure about the building, like the fact that it had a team of amazing stonemasons or stained glass experts and other kinds of conservationists and organisers who actually run the building, given that the church has no state aid. And there are parallels there, I think, with people not wanting to pay but wanting it to be there. And certainly for music, I think we've found, and I went to the Thames Valley thing last night with Robert Hollingworth, which was really interesting and enjoyable. And Robert got onto this a little bit, the sort of capricious nature of people web browsing and finding your product, expecting to click and to take that content for free, because the web makes us passive and idle and capricious, as much as it might make us search out like eager beavers trying to look for the content that we value. For a lot of people, you're scrolling, you find something nice. What people want from music often, I think, is the sudden tear-jerking emotional payoff that music can give them, but they're not very interested in how the music got to be made or how the musicians pay their gas bill or whatever. And I think it's the emotion without the effort or the sensation of music that reminded me very much of the feeling where people might want to walk into an amazing cathedral and feel the sensation of the architecture, the space, maybe the presence of something spiritual, and then leave again and go on with their lives, which is all fine. The problem is that musicians are professionally invested in this stuff, and so they have to be able to work and make their living in order to supply those kind of quality experiences to people who need music to be there. And I suppose the other thing, if I lead away from that well-trodden subject, is that I wish we were able as musicians to explain to people and to society, politicians, funders, that the secret that we know, that all of you watching know when you're singing, playing, making music, is that the beauty of music and all art is in the game, is in the making, is in the play of the elements together, not really in the final product. And that's one of the reasons, I think, why we get vexed with the reactions of audiences or this taking of content without context. Because what we as musicians should really be speaking up about all the time is getting more people to do the activity rather than consume the product of the activity. Because the music is the making part. The music is the process, which I've talked about again and again. I've become more and more convinced of this as I was through university work. I was the examiner who was common to all the recitals from first year undergrad to masters and PhD, but if we had one. Anyway, I would sit there for hours marking against scores, checking the accuracy of playing. And of course, what I would say to students in advance of these was, yes, you must, of course, play the notes right. You must have a great technique. Your stagecraft must be good, but I also need you to move me. And I, forgive me if I've mentioned this before, but I used to rotate my attention in different ways. So I would focus on, say, the hands of the guitarist, the violinist, the oboist. Make sure actually that their technique was good. Look at the singer's posture. Think about their stagecraft and think about their technique. And then I would look at their learning and check that they'd got the notes or the texts, and actually they designed a great program. And then I would close my eyes or look at the stained glass window at the back of the converted church space, the very beautiful St. Gregory's space. And I would try to allow the music to seep past the rational conscious brain and to just see if I could be moved by this person. Because really, the technique without the emotion is empty sounding fury, isn't it? There's nothing especially going on. One can be very impressed, one could be rationally amazed, but you also need to feel some humanity in the music. But you are demanding both at the same time, and I think that's the essence of performance. The problem then, of course, comes for universities is in how to rationalise that into criteria which can stand up to student challenge or external validation, and that's the problem with all kinds of arts. But I still think that, I mean, it's great to lose yourself in technique, in geeking out about detail, but it's also really, really important to allow aesthetic appreciation into the live performance moment. And because music is about the interaction of people in a space through time, all coming together in the medium of sound, is very important to make music move and touch. It's not just an ostensible product that you make to impress or garnish an occasion. I mean, this must be such a familiar thing for other musicians watching, especially those who are paid by an institution, as I was, for example, to be a sort of ribbon that elevated a ceremony, say in the cathedral of graduation. It was wonderful and a privilege to do that. But my feeling, and what I always said to the musicians, was for every graduand in the space, this is their one day, and what we are doing is giving them emotional lifting in what turns out to be a quite long service of people processing and clapping. So we're giving them a moment of emotional release. We cannot just be there as a kind of ceremonial add-on. We have to engage with the people in the room and what they need the ceremony to be. So I think music can be very ostensible, like a product, and it can make occasions. It can support liturgy and ritual. It can satisfy a corporation or a patron, and we need these structures and money, of course. But it needs to be at the same time for the musician inwardly sufficient of itself, because otherwise it will lack integrity and sincerity, and it won't work actually in the other respects. So I think music is endlessly subversive in that way, like all the arts, because while it's outwardly serving those things, its inward scale of values never connects properly with the fiscal scales of the world of consuming and commissioning, because I suppose the rewards sit within the act. The rewards for a musician are about creativity and connection and satisfaction through that medium that they have chosen, that they excel in, and a sense of the one and the many coming together. That's what music can do for people. It can allow them to feel part of something much bigger, and at the same time completely themselves within that situation. And that is miraculous, I think. The miracle of being in the world together, and it can be very articulating of the wonder of simply being alive, simply being in a space. So I think it's wonderful when people commission and open their checkbooks and salary musicians, but I think all musicians know there has to be an element of integrity which drives them underneath. Or perhaps I'm just wildly idealistic, and that's why I've always chafed a little bit with management structures, because I suppose I hold dear those values because I would put integrity so high. But there's some beautiful comments coming up in the, and I agree, Catherine, voice is touch. That's right. So, it's been very hard, hasn't it? This prolonging of the silence. One of the things I've been thinking about is how when we come back, because nothing feels the same when you go back to it somehow, which of course is just a product of getting over what we've gone through, which is a global trauma, a terrible amount of suffering and worry and death, and it's been very, very worrying for people. And I think it's maybe a moment where musicians have to say, should we just go back to what we were doing before? Because I'm not sure that we have social contexts to serve in the same way as most of the music that we value and perform and learn together. And I'm thinking of classical music, of opera, as well as my stuff, the early music, the polyphony. Because if you think about, I don't know, Josquin, he's got elite patrons and courts and churches to serve, but he's also got, through publishing, wider society, and he's got, as I saw in the Salve Regina talk, this wider context of popular devotion and buy-in to the themes of those texts. And when we revive those things, we're not speaking to the audience which was originally there. And to some extent, I think musicians have to make sure they can justify that incomprehension of launching something back into the world which is no longer of this world. I mean, I'm a very romantic person about these things, so I think firstly that there is intrinsic value in that music, and secondly I think that by remaking it in the moment, we present connect together through it. It's a medium for connection, it's a medium for emotion. But I do think we need to think about that, and also where is the musical response to the pandemic? In a sense, perhaps it's about to come, and perhaps it's in rock popular music that I don't see because I'm a grumpy middle-aged man. But I thought I'm expecting to see motets or requiems or symphonies. I don't know if people are busy writing those now, or actually whether musicians were all flummoxed and don't really know how to respond to it or what to do, or they just hope we can go back. But I think we have to remember that we'd already lost the vast majority of society before the pandemic. And now currently we can only see a fraction of our regular audiences, or we can do it online. And it's not good enough, I think, to go back to the cosy routines of the concerts and the dressing up and the clapping, because we need to make sure that music is still there for people who need it. And that means meeting them in different places. And we've talked before about how a lot of people now consume music through their eyes and in solitude. And that seems to me a massive change, which is the technology is driving. And we have to think partly about how we present stuff and whether concert structures are good enough. And when I give a concert, I often, just beforehand, partly to calm my nerves, I sort of go to a door somewhere, look out, listen to the blackbirds singing, and then I look at the people rushing by with their shopping and, busloads of people going home. And I wonder whether I could ever get those people interested in the thing I'm doing, or the thing the choir's going to present, or the amazing heart-melting beauty of Palestrina or Victoria or Josquin. And I feel sad that they won't come in and be touched by that. But another part of me knows that I would struggle to cope if all those people came in. I don't just mean logistically. I mean, I don't know if they'd know how to listen or behave or respond to the music. And I say this in honesty, that to some extent it's easier to deal with people who are in the know, the cognoscenti, who will support everything, than actually to reach out to groups of people and types of people in society who haven't had experience of this stuff and don't know what it is and how to handle the object, the thing, like a dealer in the Antiques Roadshow who gets the vase out of the box and knows everything about it. And then, if I was given this, I wouldn't know anything about that object. I wouldn't understand or have a conception. So won't go on too much longer about this, but I think a lot about how museum galleries which have been empty are now filling up. I walked past the British Museum on Monday, looked forlorn in the rain, and I thought they're waiting to let people back in. But at the same time, we as gallery curators of culture, if we're looking after repertoire and canon and CDs, who gets recorded, who gets performed, to some extent, I think we would be quite panicked if some of the structures and familiar norms of listening and being were disrupted. But I think we have to be brave about this. I think if this is a moment to reinvigorate and re-champion this music, then of course the first thing is we have to get education back on the menu, because only by gifting this music to everybody and giving them the chance to find their talent and excel do we actually find a way for people not to think that music isn't for them, that they can't go through that gallery door into that space, attend a concert, because they're not the right kind of person. By exposing people just through simple things, music appreciation, group singing at school, and allowing talent to rise, I think we could make sure it's everybody's possession, because it's not ours. We pass through and we are vessels for that music while we're alive and active, and while we can hear it and while we can make it, but it's not ours to keep. And so we have to be careful not to overguard it. At the same time, we have to be conservators and advocates for that music, and we have to make sure that we don't compromise the quality of what we do, and we don't throw away the essence, the important essence of what it is. So, I think education is the top, and then more people in the media and in festivals who commission things, and people who don't cringe at complexity and aren't embarrassed by difficult elite things, but at the same time enthusiasts who champion the esoteric and have an open hand to lots of different, because that's the world we live in. We live in a world of endless variety and juxtaposition, and it's all very postmodern, and you can't curate and wall off what you're doing in the same way you used to be. I don't think sometimes, and this is not an early music thing, but maybe for 18th, 19th century music, you can get a sense of a sneering cognoscenti who actually want to keep people out and keep things the same. I don't think those people who are champions of music do the music much favour. And also, if we continue to champion only niche composers and causes, then the hostility of society is ready baked. I mean, this stuff does not get onto television. We need to onto the radio very much. We need to make sure it's there for when people are ready, without compromising the substance. And finally, I suppose music is not a health salve. It has that beneficial side effect for mental well-being and actually for physical health. We know all about lung capacity and hearts beating in sync when we're in a choir. And we know about the incredible brain development of children who learn an instrument, and the self-discipline they learn, and the courteous courage that they learn. We know all of that. But we mustn't allow music to become a lifestyle salve for well-being, which is often really a sticking plaster over toxic work and life cultures that people have. What we need to do is champion it, so that we put this culture back in common with people. And somehow, I don't know how we do it really, but it needs to go back to becoming a common cultural heritage and not a consumable product that we just find and take for free, and forget how it's made and the expertise of those who brought it together, and not pretending, of course, that music is valueless by giving it away all the time. And here am I doing free talk, which I love to do. It's an exercise for me, and it's also a way of earning some donations. But there is so much on YouTube and on Facebook now. It's really hard to assert that, as Robert Hollingworth was saying last night, that this piece of music is worth something. Anyway, let's not be forlorn gallery curators looking out through the drizzle as the same few people come in, because that's not going to be sustainable, is it? I'm going to take you into the Zoom room soon. I just wanted to show you this brilliant CD that Mike House recommended to me late last night, and I've been able to find the CD notes. It's John Potter's note. This is fantastic. The reason this really interested me is that one of the things musicologists do is they spend loads of time trying to establish the first version and the pure version of the composer's intentions. There's a whole, as John says here, there's a whole branch of musicology entirely devoted to the establishment of the true original source of a piece of music. And we took it from Bible studies, and we make little trees, little filiae, which go back to perhaps a lost X at the top, a source that no longer exists. And then we play off the difference, and we try and find what the composer meant and get rid of the pollution. And this disc is really interesting because the point of the disc is to take us into repertoire and see how it was being adapted and messed around with by real musicians in the 16th century who were using it for their own purposes. And I thought it was really, really good program. So, and there's another point he makes here. Very few musicians read tablature, tab. So this huge amount of music, and I don't read it. I tried, I learnt it a bit, but I can't remember how to do it. And so he says, people don't read it, they don't know it's there, and it gets in as a footnote. Also, he talks about the way that repertoires of music build up. So we can think, and this was in my Salve Regina talk, the idea that Josquin was an influence on Victoria. And as I established, of course, this Salve Regina in particular was copied at the front of a manuscript in Seville, and then everybody tried to outdo Josquin with more ostinatos and cantus firmuses and numbers and so forth. And he talks about the lack of a distinction between early and late, and also that music is added to the stream of music from many previous generations. The music of the past is also music of the present. Now, this is a great note, which led me to go and look at a book of intabulated music. This is the the Forest of the Sirens, Silve de Sirenas, from 1547. And it is oh, yeah, we might talk about that next week, actually. It's jam-packed with arrangements of Morales and Josquin. And let's have a very quick look here. So we've got, if it's going to work for me, be kind, computer. So here is a quick skirt through. Here is a bit of Morales, Vigo Prudentissima, all intabulated. And I'll play a little bit of some intabulated Josquin in the back room when we get there. But I can't read this. What's fascinating is the composers who are in there and the repertoire all muddled between motets, bienthicos, and other kinds of secular. There's some Josquin. There is, in fact, Benedicta II in Mulieribus. Okay, so Josquin's Ave Maria, which starts there. And so I thought this was such an interesting point that this disc makes, which is music was alive and it wasn't an untouchable entity, a fixed document, a set of symbols that embodied the composer's intentions. This is a 19th century conception. And one of the ways we might get back to our audiences is to encourage that sense of play and flexibility with music, and not of tightly obeying the score, which takes us back to that those conceptions that we must be, of course, faithful to the original spirit and structure of the music, but also free to be expressive in the moment together. And that surely is the element of being, is the absolute epitome of being a musician. Now, Zimona, could you please plonk into the chat the Zoom link? And I will wait a moment and then I will invite people to come through. I also love catching up with your comments, so I'll do that afterwards. I'm off to see my grandfather, who is 99 today. 99, bless him. So I won't maybe look at some of the comments until much later. And finally, of course, to those of you who were wondering, I'll just say this very softly for those who might be of a gentle disposition, but Gypsy Tart, as is known to all school children, makes you fart, and custard powder makes it louder. Oh, it was so much fun. All right, so I'm going to say goodbye to Facebook now, but I'm staying in this room and I have a few lovely, lovely things to play you. So I'll stop the live stream. Come and join me if you have time. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for watching. Have a lovely bank holiday weekend.